Central European time is now 21 hours. AFN News, a summary from the wires of the AP and UPI. Here is Bob Andresen.
Astronauts David Scott and James Irwin are in their lunar lander, the Falcon, after separating from the command ship. The astronauts had some trouble trying to separate the two crafts, but later they overcame the difficulty. Scott and Irwin are flying in the lunar lander, while astronaut Al Warden remains behind in the command ship. Scott and Irwin head for man's riskiest moon landing in about 2 hours. They plan to touch down at 11:15 p.m. Central European time in a boulder-strewn basin that is ringed by 15,000-foot mountains and a gaping canyon. After touchdown, which will come at about 11:15 our time, AFN News plans to present live coverage of that touchdown beginning at 11:05 this evening. After overcoming the difficulty of a loose electrical connection, the Falcon, with Scott and Irwin, separated from the command ship. Scott reported a good clean set as the two ships moved apart. In other news,
at the sound of the last tone, it will be 22 hours, Central European time. The World at 2200, a detailed summary of news developments from the wires of the AP and UPI on this 30th day of July 1971. From the AFN Europe Central News Desk at Frankfurt, here is Paul Macco. Apollo 15 ready to land on the moon, congressional developments, and a pair of disastrous plane crashes. These are top stories in the world at 2200. Now details. Apollo 15's two moon explorers have successfully separated their landing craft from the command ship after one abortive separation attempt, which created quite a bit of tension at Mission Control in Houston. On the second try, astronauts Irwin and Scott successfully made the separation, and everything remains on schedule for their descent to the lunar surface in a little more than an hour from now. AFN's coverage of the lunar landing is scheduled to begin at 23:05 hours. CBS News at the Apollo Space Center reports that Al Warden, who will remain in the command ship Endeavour while his colleagues work on the moon, fixed the problem that caused the unsuccessful attempt at undocking the first time.
Falcon and Endeavour were supposed to separate behind the moon and reappear as two separate orbiting objects. But when they came around the limb of the moon, Colonel Scott's report was simply no SEP. They were unable to disengage because of a faulty wiring lash-up. Al Warden, flying the command module Endeavour, found the trouble, fixed it, and a half hour behind schedule, the second separation attempt went like this.
Hey, we're on the calculations. Good. Right. Okay, you're on your own. Okay, good, clear up.
Now separate, Warden is lifting the Endeavour into a 60-mile parking orbit, while Scott and Irwin are pressing on with preparations for the moon landing, which is just 3 hours from now. Reed Collins, CBS News, Space Headquarters, New York.
That report was filed just moments after the successful separation occurred at 1913 Central European time tonight. Earlier today, astronaut David Scott gave Mission Control a full description of the site where the lunar lander Falcon is scheduled to set down. Scott told ground control about a fissure he noticed not far from the Apennine mountain landing site.
There's a very interesting little fissure just below us here, Bob. It looks like there might be a little flow coming out of it, but it's almost an arrowhead-shaped affair, and it certainly doesn't have any features like any impact. It's very sharp and distinct and makes a very distinct arrowhead. And here we come up on the ridges on the west side of Serenitatis, just at the foothills of the Hadley-apennine. And you can see there's some relief as we look back to the south there. There is some very distinct relief in the shore of Serenitatis with some wrinkle ridges that follow the contour.
Astronaut David Scott and James Irwin will be giving Mission Control a more complete account of the landing site when the Falcon sets down in about an hour from now. Again, AFN's coverage of the moon landing starts at 23:05 tonight. Central European time is now 23 hours.
AFN News and Sports Nightcap, a 5-minute digest of late developments as compiled at the AFN News and Sports desks from the wires of AP and UPI. First news, Specialist John Gendro reporting. After one unsuccessful separation attempt, 2 of the Apollo 15 astronauts have succeeded in releasing their lunar excursion module from the command ship. Astronauts David Scott and James Irwin now will try mankind's riskiest lunar landing in a basin area ringed by 15,000-foot mountains and a wide canyon. Astronaut Alfred Worden will remain in orbit around the moon while his colleagues attempt the lunar setdown. AFN News will broadcast the lunar landing live immediately following this news and sports nightcap.
This is Jay Barbary, Manned Spacecraft Center, Houston, along with Peter Hackus. 1.5 minutes ago, astronauts David Scott and James Irwin fired the descent rocket on their lunar lander Falcon and began their tricky landing to a moon valley surrounded by 15,000-foot high mountains and a flanked by a mile-wide canyon. The mountains are the Apennines and the canyon is Hadley Rio, and they should touch down there in about 9 minutes for hopefully a 67-hour stay. Peter, I believe we're getting a report in now as the firing is taking place from Mission Control. And we can stand by.
Roger, go with 2.
Go.
Mags compare. We're showing an altitude of about 46,000 feet now. About 2% low on fuel. Okay, at 1.
You're hearing the voices of the astronauts, and here with me we have Mr. John Kaiser, site manager for General Motors, who make the guidance system from the Kennedy Space Center.
The crew updated their guidance systems targeting. It was tending to steer them about 2,800 feet downrange.
H-Stop's 4 high. Falcon Houston, we're happy with your fuel.
John, if you hear anything up.
Okay, it's nice to hear.
I sure will, Jay. The other voice you're hearing is coming from Mission Control belonging to Doug Ward, who is the commentator there at the moment, the voice of Mission Control.
83 minutes, showing to 0.
How long are we now waiting for touchdown?
H-Stop's right on.
For approximately 9 minutes
Go
from
read
touchdown.
Oh.
We just passed the key plus 3
Falcon Houston, you go at 3.
point where they yawed vertically, and the astronauts are now looking
Roger, go at 3.
or, if you will, they're laying on their back.
Altitude now about 42,000 feet. Velocity down to about 3,900 feet per second.
3,400 Delta H.
You're actually listening to the
Line
landing
up,
of the astronauts. They are approaching the high Apennine Mountain.
We agree with
This
Delta
is a
H.
steeper trajectory, a steeper path to go over than before. I believe before it was about 18 degrees. This is about 25.
About a 25-degree incline, yes.
And Houston, ED batteries checked.
Right now we're in the first of the 3 phases of landing. This is called a braking phase, or program 63. And in this phase we're firing the descent engine, full thrust on, slowing down the speed of the spacecraft.
Okay, about 3 low.
The next major phase we're coming up on is what's called high gate, or the visibility phase. That should occur about 9 minutes and 24 seconds after the ignition.
Okay, we'll stand by here and monitor John and listen in with
The
our
primary guidance
listeners.
system thinks it's about 3,000 feet lower than it is. The radar should correct that.
Port 30. Altitude 4,000 high. H-Stop's right on. One oxidizer good. Okay. Delta H is 2,000.
Something about the altitude being about 4,000 feet high.
Yes, they're reporting their altitude, and it's dropping down from about 50,000 feet where they ignited the engine. They're now down to in the
We're about
neighborhood
5
of
minutes into the
33,000
maneuver
feet.
now. And Glenn Lunny taking a status, grow all the way.
High. About 9 high.
That was Flight Director Glenn Lunny here at the Mission Control Center giving a go for all the way.
Okay, understand. Go at 5.
We're monitoring along with you here Peter Ackus is in NBC's Apollo Space Center. Peter, if you would like to jump in anywhere, go ahead. Jay, I wonder if you'd ask your guest to give us a word on
high, H.10 high.
On the difficulty, or I should say the added factor of having an extra heavy LEM this time.
Down now to 2,400 feet.
H dot, of course, is the altitude rate in feet per second. And 10 high means they're not going down as quickly as possible as they plan, but it's very close to nominal. I don't see any problem here.
Did as Peter just asked us, John, did the added weight of the LEM, this is the first, what they call the extended LEM, did that give you any problems with the guidance system?
No, it did not.
The delta H is looking pretty good.
We'll monitor the astronaut forces again.
Falcon Houston, your go at 6. Roger, go at 6.
When should Dave Scott
We're about 3 minutes now from the approach phase, altitude about 2,500 feet, 25,000 feet, correction.
Altitude 1,000 high, H about 4 high. AX-axis over right drop.
We might point out,
throttle down, 7+23.
Jay, that they at this point cannot as yet see where they're headed for. They can't see their landing point quite yet. Yes, Peter, I was just asking John Kaiser here, at what point would they be able to see the huge mountain range that they'll be going over in the Hadley Reel, which is the mile-wide canyon?
At approximately 9 minutes and 30 seconds from the time of ignition, this program will end and they'll go into what's called Program 64, the visibility or approach program. That's when the spacecraft will be pitched forward and they will begin to see the landing site. At the same time, the guidance system will display the coordinates for them to look through their landing point designator so they can accurately pinpoint where their site is. This program also allows them the option of redesignating the landing
You're
site.
listening to NBC News. The tricky descent and landing of the lunar module. Jay?
Yes, Peter, everything is still right on schedule.
And here with us, yes, Peter, everything is still right on schedule. And here with us we have John Kaiser, who is the site manager for General Motors. They make the guidance system for the landing sequence here. We're still monitoring the astronauts on their way to a landing.
Now about 16,000 feet.
And we're also receiving reports from Doug Ward. Let's monitor.
Good.
Guidance says it looks as if we may be coming in a little bit south of the site. Everything looks good, however.
A little bit south. Let me get my maps out here and see. Looking south of the site, that would actually be closer.
You're coming up on 8,000 feet.
Okay. To Hadley.
Yes, that's right. And closer to the elbow
Coming up
portion
on
of the grill.
feet. P64, okay? Have LPD. LPD.
They just changed the program to
Coming right.
64.
40. 5,000 feet. 39.
5,000 feet.
39. 38. 39. 4,000 feet.
4,000 feet. This is James Irwin counting it down.
45. 47. 52. 3,000 feet. 52. 52. 51. 50. 47. 47. 2,000 feet.
They're coming up on the last phase of the landing, program 66.
But we must mention here that they're already over the mountains at this time, aren't they? And they should be dropping directly down, sort of a helicopter.
Yes, they are dropping down and are looking at the landing site now. And if they don't like the particular spot they're aiming for, they can redesignate the guidance system and it will advance or move the landing site.
Okay, John, let's stick with them now. Just listen.
700, 46. 600, 48. 500, 49. Minus 17. Minus 15. 400 and minus 14. 50, 66. Okay. 300 feet. Minus 11. Minus 11. 250. Minus 11. 9% fuel. 200. Minus 11. 150. Minus 7. Minus 6. 120 feet. Minus 6. There, I've got some rust. Minus 5. 100 feet at 5. 9% fuel. Minus 5. 80 at 5. Minus 3. 60 at 3.
James Irwin here.
50 at 3. Cross pointers look good. 40 at 3.
40 feet.
33.
Hovering, ready to
25.
fly.
2. 7% fuel. 20 at 1. 15 at 1. Minus 1. Minus 1. 6% fuel. 10 feet, minus 1.
Just 10 feet off the surface.
8 feet, minus 1. Contact.
Contact. Falcon is down.
Man. Okay, Houston, the Falcon is on the plane at Hadley.
How about that? On the plane at Hadley, right where they wanted to go. John, this is at Moon Valley at the base of the Apennine Mountains. They flanked this landing site on about 3 sides, rising up to 12,000 feet, and on the 4th side by Hadley Rill, the mile-wide canyon. Let's hear the reports of the astronauts here.
That was a jubilant Dave Scott reporting Apollo 15 on the plane at Hadley.
Doug Ward here.
ACL looks good.
The first thing...
Haley rehearsal. Helix steady. Okay, did you get the landing radar open? Yep. Okay.
We'll jump in here and say the first thing they have to do is make sure all systems on board the Lunar Module Falcon are as they should be, because in case that they should have to abort this mission, get off the moon in a hurry, they will make sure everything is ready. They have to go through these procedures at this time, and after things settle down here in a couple of minutes, we should hear from the astronauts describing something about the landing site. We'll listen in.
Roger, stay for T1. Okay. Hey, let's get on with the little checklist.
Well, they've made it safely to the moon in history's trickiest moon landing, trickiest manned moon landing at least, and a number of sighs of relief, undoubtedly, inside Mission Control, certainly around the country and around the world. NBC's coverage of the flight of Apollo 15 will continue after this message.
It takes a lot of people, helping people, talking people. It takes a lot of people, working nights and days. People, helping people, helping other people. That's what it's all about.
There were 31 million people in the United States in 1858 when Abe Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." That still goes for more than 200 million Americans today. Living together in racial harmony must begin by trying to understand the other fellow's problems. It helps when we try.
Helping other people, that's what it's all about.
Back us again in NBC News Apollo Space Center with Jay Barbary. We have just concluded, as we said, the most tricky, the most touchy part of this very, very ambitious moon mission of Apollo 15. Jay, it looks as if they landed within about 2 minutes of their planned time, which indicates to me that hopefully this is a great sign for the beginning of this whole out on the moon venture.
Sure does, Peter. In fact, they plan to be there for 67 hours, and they're right where they want to be. Everything looks very nominal as they stay here at the Manned Spacecraft Center instead of normal. Very good. But our guest, Mr. John Kaiser, who is here with us, followed the flight, the landing to the Hadley Reel and the Apennine Mountains, and everything is right as it should be at this moment. There for 67 hours, and in a short while, astronaut Scott, the commander, will open the hatch, the tunnel, I should say, at the top of the lunar lander Falcon, which will be 22 feet off the surface of the moon, and he'll stick his head out and look around and survey it. And he'll tell them here at the Mission Control Center exactly where he is and those things he sees up there. They'll be there 67 hours, and during the next 3 days, they'll make 3 excursions outside of their lunar landing craft and take the first moon car, the lunar rover, and drive about exploring the surface. They'll look for original lunar crust on the mountain slope. They'll also drive along this mile-wide canyon called Hadley Reel that meanders around their landing site, and they'll look for volcanic action. Some of the scientists feel that this reel there is 1,200 feet deep. It's a mile wide, comparable to Earth's Grand Canyon. Some of them say that it was made by a lava flow, and they'll be looking to see if it was volcanic action that did it. They're pretty well convinced after the evidence of the previous landings that there's never been any water on the moon, even though it looks like a dry riverbed. It is not, according to the scientists and the studies that have been made. John, have you anything you'd like to add to it at this moment?
Well, we're certainly going to be looking forward to the use of the LRV tomorrow on the first EVA.
LRV, now it's Lunar Rover.
That's right, the Lunar Rover vehicle. Our company also makes the majority of the mobility system, the wheels, steering, suspension for that. And that'll be the first time that's used in this environment.
Touchdown point should be something. Let's pick up this information we're getting now from the Mission Control Center.
This is just would appear to be just a few hundred feet from the planned landing point.
Doug Ward saying just a few hundred feet from the planned landing point. Peter, it seems every time that we try to pick them up that we're getting something, they shut up. I'm not quite in sync here today. What do you think about that?
Seems that way, Jay. If there were ever anything that could be called perfect, I should think that landing would be it. When you stop to think of how many hundreds of thousands of items had to work perfectly to get these men down in this pinpoint position, it's almost unbelievable that they came down so beautifully and so accurately.
Yes, it is. We might tell our listeners, while we wait to hear more from the astronauts here, that these mountains, the Apennine mountain range that they're next to, is taller than the Sierra Nevadas in California, and also taller than the Great Himalayas and the Indian Plains.
And of course, taller than something to see. Of course, taller than Pikes Peak. A number of our listeners may have been to see Pikes Peak, maybe even has gone on top of it. It is quite a feat to find their way in amongst those mountains. I think they would have had a problem. There would have been a problem had they undershot or overshot.
Yes, there would have been, I guess. That was just a small valley in there, a basin to go into. Here's some more from the space.
In fact, I just now lost contact with him. Roger. I had a beautiful view of the landing site going over, but I couldn't see anything. So you copy out.
That, of course, the voice of Al Worden, who's in his vehicle all by himself now, orbiting the moon aboard Endeavour. He'll be doing that now for the next 3 days. Taking pictures Pictures that, incidentally, never before have been taken because they're in a different position now, a different orbit.
Letter and package you send, and in your return address, too. That way the post office can do its job right and give you the kind of mail service you're paying for. Remember, mail moves the country, and zip code moves the mail.
Peter Hackus again, back at the NBC News Apollo Space Center along with Jay Barbary. Jay, is there anything that we have to catch up on now before the first reports of what they're seeing out their windows?
No, everything seems to be as it should be. In fact, it is so accurate to this point, Peter, that the transmissions we're receiving from the Falcon at Hadley Base is just a little dull at this time. Naturally, the astronauts are going through all the engineering chores that they have to do so that they can get off the moon in a hurry in case they have to.
Well, that's what I was referring to mainly.
You're right.
Another safety backup feature, which incidentally is part of every moon landing, and certainly should be. This site, as you may have said, Jay, is about 800 miles northwest of the Tranquility Base. That is the first lunar landing site of Apollo 11, and about 900 miles northeast of the Apollo 14 site. Of course, the lunar rover is not going to take these gentlemen anything like that distance, but that gives you an idea of where it is. For the Apollo 16, which will be upcoming early next year, NASA has selected a site in another heavily cratered region about 300 miles southwest of Tranquility Base. That is the Apollo 11 site. As I understand it, they have not yet chosen the site for the last planned lunar landing, Apollo 17. Obviously, we're all awaiting the excursions, and there will be 3 of them, aboard the lunar rover. The first time we've had a mechanized vehicle on the moon.
Well, everything is as it should be, Peter. As we said here before, our guest, Mr. John Kaiser, has been with us, kind enough to come in and stand by just in case there was any trouble in this very tricky landing. Of course, there wasn't. It's an engineering feat that boggles the mind, to use a trite phrase that is often used in this business, but again, it is. You just can't imagine anyone taking a landing craft depending on rocket power around a planet where there's no atmosphere and riding it to the surface of the moon and requiring all of this tricky navigation and guidance that is required to go between mountain peaks and set something like a lunar lander Falcon down on the face of the moon. But they did it and among the mountains. That's the story on Apollo 15 up to this moment.
This is the American Forces Network Europe. This live coverage provided by the NBC Radio and Television Network and relayed to Europe via satellite by the American Forces Radio and Television Service. AFN's next scheduled live Apollo coverage, a description of the lunar surface by the Apollo astronauts, at 45 minutes past midnight. Listen to AFN News on the hour for progress reports on the flight of Apollo 15.
Central European time is now 29 minutes past the 23rd hour. We now rejoin the regularly scheduled program In Progress, John Doremus.
Very shortly, the American Forces Network Europe will resume its coverage of the flight of Apollo 15. Coverage provided by the major American radio networks and relayed to Europe via satellite by the American Forces Radio and Television Service. Shortly, the Apollo moon explorers are expected to open the hatch of their landing craft and describe the scene before them.
This is Peter Hackus of NBC News at the NBC News Apollo Space Center along with Jay Barbary at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston. Well, as of now, the 2 gentlemen from the United States have been on the moon for a couple of minutes under an hour and a half. We've just been told by Houston Control that there's going to be a short delay in what's called the SEVA, the Stand-up Extravehicular Activity, which was to have taken place beginning a couple of minutes ago. They are, at the moment, we're told, about 10 or 15 minutes behind schedule. Hopefully, they say, they'll make up that difference very shortly. They have given us a report. That is, astronauts Scott and Irwin have given the ground control a report on what they've seen. It's been breathtaking, it's been spectacular, but presumably not nearly as breathtaking or spectacular as when astronaut Scott stands up inside, as he's to do very shortly, and looks out around him and around the lunar module. He's to take a 360-degree turn, taking pictures. He'll be reporting on what he sees both in front of him, all the way around, and at a distance. He'll be using a rather high-powered camera with a 500-millimeter lens. He'll be giving a report on what he sees geologically. He'll be giving a report on the... Let's pick up the two-way conversation. Go ahead.
Roger, Dave. We suggest you try first holding the bracket at the front in place while you push the twist aft and jiggle it.
You want to take that one, Peter? Okay. Getting together their gear for the approaching depressurization of the cabin. All has to be in readiness. Many people, I think, are misled by the fact that although they're not actually getting outside and walking around on the moon, that the decompression is just as complete. In other words, merely by opening the hatch door, just to stand up and look around, there is just as much of a lunar vacuum inside the spacecraft as if you were out on the lunar surface. So all of the necessary precautions have to be made prior to merely opening the hatch, whether or not they're going outside. Jay? Yes, Peter, as they just mentioned there, the report what he sees in the way of geographic locations. His observations, of course, being noted very carefully by those at Houston, because based on this will be the determining factor of how they will make those motorized excursions. They've been now on the plane at Hadley Base for just under 2 hours, and we've experienced some small delay of perhaps 10 or 15 minutes in the flight plan before they get their go-ahead to open the hatch. But apparently nothing serious, a few delays here and there in putting on their backpack and one thing and another. To repeat again, when one opens a hatch on the moon, it's just as serious or just as important as getting out completely and getting down on the lunar surface. So all of those things have to be taken care of in advance of opening the hatch. Let's now listen to the conversation between Houston and the Hadley base.
Okay, I understand.
We might try to say here, Peter, while we're waiting for more description from the astronauts, that they have communicated.
Helmet lock.
That means that they have their suits on, their backpacks, and they are now transmitting from their portable transmitters in the backpacks to the Mission Control Center. And sounds like the only thing they have left to do, Jay, is depressurize the cabin and then open the hatch. That's about it, the way we have it here at this time.
Cabin recess coming open. Open. Hey, overhead or forward dump valve open at order at 3.5.
While they go down this list, I might say again that even the astronaut who is inside, who is not sticking his head and shoulders above the hatch, astronaut Jim Irwin, is in the same atmosphere as the man who is poking his head out. Once you open that hatch, it's a vacuum. It's the lunar vacuum, both inside as well as outside. So whether or not not he's out on the moon or sticking his head out, even though he's inside the lunar module, when that hatch is open, he's in the same atmosphere as if he were out on the lunar surface. So he, too, has to be just as well equipped with his backpack, and all of the other precautions have to be taken for him, as well as for the mission commander, Dave Scott. Incidentally, Scott will be standing on top of the rocket casing. There's not too much room to move around inside one of these lunar modules. And in order to focus head and shoulders out that hatch cover, he has to stand on top of the rocket casing, that is the casing of the ascent engine, which is what they have to sit on most of the time. Comfort isn't exactly a problem up there, Peter, where it's only 1/6 the gravity of Earth. I suppose a sharp edge is a sharp edge. Yeah. That's another thing, incidentally, they have to watch when they're inside the cabin, is not to bump any sharp edges with their spacesuits on and pressurized. Mm-hmm. Are you going to go out and look at the mountains tonight and see if you can see the Falcon? I think there's an answer for that, Jay, but I haven't got one yet. Okay. I would imagine there'd be a lot of people around the world who'll be doing that. Even if you can't see the lunar module, you can certainly see the general area where it's located. See you. Okay, go. Here we go, Peter. Partially open the overhead hatch. This is the voice of David Scott. He is maneuvering up through this tunnel. Open, Dave. Dave's partially open. Okay, I'm going to go auto on the dump valve here. Okay. Okay, I'm auto on the forward dump valve. Okay, overhead hatch, full open and latched. Okay, coming full open. Over, show Jim.
Dave and Jim, Houston. Roger. Endeavour places you very near November crater. Very close to November crater.
Okay, a little short, huh?
A little short and a little north.
Okay, Dave, you got the hatch open? Okay. Hey. How about the LTG ISA? We can break in here and say that when Commander Scott gives his panoramic view to Mission Control, they will be able to use this information to pinpoint exactly where the Falcon is located, and also tell them a little more about the excursions outside in the next 3 days. Hey, give me a little. You want me to? Hey. The voices are breaking up here, but we're managing to make out most of what they're saying. Okay, you sitting up there now? Yeah, just stand by. David Scott now pushing his head and torso outside of the lunar module, standing up about 25, 26 feet above the lunar surface and taking a look around. In a moment, he'll be reporting all of the sights that he sees. You know, Peter, officials wanted the stand-up EVA because on the I don't know about you, Peter, but it's just unimaginable to me to visualize where these men are and what they're about to look at. We know they're there. We know what they're supposed to see. But again, it's very difficult to picture what is actually happening, that they're 250,000 miles away. They're on the face of the moon. Next step. I think that this landing is what... Stand on the engine cover. Oh, okay. He's standing up there. Get to work. Very easy. Master alarm. Good.
engine cover.
The number of lights there. Anything. Oh boy, what a view.
There he is out.
Okay, there's nothing going on with that master alarm. Okay.
Falcon, select separator number 2, please.
Okay, stand by, Joe.
Roger.
This is Capsule Communicator Joseph Allen, who is an astronaut here, and he is their fourth link between the Mission Control Center and all the flight controllers.
Hey there, Dave, I'm going to get step 2 here. Go ahead.
While this is going on, they still have to maintain certain procedures within the spacecraft
Okay, I have
itself.
step 2 selected, Joe.
And it's not easy
Reset the master alarm, Jim.
pushing yourself up through that narrow opening, even without all the things on your back.
Maybe tension hose effect somehow.
That's just what I was thinking. It's a difficult thing to do, and he's got a lot of hoses and the backpack and so on. Has to be very careful.
Okay, Dave, ready for me to hand you the map?
And he has to be very careful not to pinch his suit.
Lunar and Icarus and Shane 5 North St. George window spur. Beautiful.
Fantastic.
Okay, let's get a good fix. Hand me the compass there.
St. George is a huge crater which should be off to the west of the spacecraft, just at the elbow of Hadley Reel, the big canyon we've been telling you about.
On the map, this is the sun compass first. Get a fix on our position.
If they are indeed near November crater, they are not very far from their proposed landing site.
And actually, at the sun angle, Joe, there's no direct sunlight coming into the cabin.
Roger, Jim, understand.
They would be northeast of their landing site slightly. And according to our map here, they would only be maybe
Okay, hand me the big overlay map, Jim.
a length of a football field off.
Going to be hustling you along here. We think we know pretty well where you are, so maybe we shouldn't spend too much time just on location.
Okay. Another quick one. Minute peak is 255.
Roger.
What Dave Scott is doing now is by using his compass
The first camera works with the 60-millimeter lens.
and some lunar maps he has with him. He is identifying not only what he sees, but the bearing,
Okay.
the degrees of reference as he looks out over the lunar surface. These can be translated, of course, at Houston, and this will be a really good way to pinpoint their exact location.
And Dave, bearing on a close feature, if you can identify it, please.
Right now, Joe.
Hadley,
Get on with the photography here.
Roger, we agree.
Hadley Delta should be directly south, and he said that was 182. So 180 degrees is directly south, and 182.
22 frames in the stereo band, Dave. Right.
That should make them where.
Dave, while you're firing them off there, does the trafficability look pretty good?
That sure does, Joe. The largest fragment I can see right now on the surface is probably about 6 to 8 inches. However, inside the walls of Pluton, there's some pretty big chunks.
Roger.
They're now looking over the. They're now looking over the place to see what the best routes will be for driving their motorized lunar rover.
in order to judge where they're going to drive over the next couple of days, what they're seeing, and to get the exact location of the lunar module. Let's listen to more conversation from Houston to the lunar module Falcon. They're now taking the photographs. They're trying to hurry along the EVA, the stand-up EVA, Peter. It had been planned for 30 minutes, but because that they got out a little late, they're going to hurry it along.
Joe, I'm taking a picture now of that bright French crater just to the south of the rim of St. George. And now over to third window, I believe.
Roger. And Dave, we're coming up on 15 minutes, SEVA.
Okay. Crater he is taking a picture of is about 3.5 miles away. That's a little strange because I didn't think you could see that far on the lunar surface. I thought the horizon would come into play before then. Oh, remember he has a little elevation, Jay, which we haven't had before. Right, that would be the only explanation for it. Because
during the 500, Dave, I have the other camera. Dave, try not to hit my foot there.
During the planned excursions, the long EVAs over the next 3 days when they drive off in the lunar rover, the moon buggy, they will be out of sight of the lunar module. And, of course, they have a navigation system on board to find their way back, and if that should fail, they can always return on their same track.
It's almost useless, Bill.
Each time I see these men up there, Peter, I get the idea that somebody's going to drive in with a Jeep and run them off. If they're in the wrong place, like a desert or something. I said earlier, I just can't visualize them being on the moon, not yet. I think it's hard for any of us to have that kind of visualization. We really only, I suppose, get to believe it when after they're long since back and we have the chance to see all of those close-up photos. They should be absolutely breathtaking this time with that 500-millimeter lens. Yes, I think this is what the scientists here have all been waiting for. This is one of the big payoffs, to go to a site like the Hadley site that offers them all the advantages that they need to accurately date the birth of the solar system. They have here at the means the mountains, the Mare, which is a sea, the marsh of decay or swamp of decay. They also have the Hadley Rill. All the things there could accurately tell them that when the solar system was actually born. And they're looking.
Scott is currently taking a series of panoramic sequences using alternately a Hasselblad camera with a 60-millimeter lens and one equipped with a 500-millimeter telephoto lens.
As one of the scientists told me the other day, the 3 previous landings were to prove that man could actually go to the moon.
Got all the photos. Good, Jim. Okay, I got it. Hey, let me start by 12 o'clock, Joe, and I'll go around real quick. On the far distant horizon, apparently across the rill, I can see just about on 1 o'clock now a very large mountain, which I'd have to call Hill 305.
Roger.
And all of the features around here are very smooth. The tops of the mountains are rounded off. There are no sharp, jagged peaks. There are no large boulders apparent anywhere. The whole surface of the area appears to be smooth, with the largest fragments I can see are in the walls of Pluton. There are no boulders at all on St. George, Hill 305, Bennett, or as far as I can tell, look at back up at Hadley. Hadley's sort of in the shadow. It's a gently rolling terrain, completely around 360 degrees hummocky, much like you saw on 14. The walls of Pluton are fairly well covered with debris, fragments up to, I'd estimate, maybe 2 to 3 meters. irregular, no layering, just sort of scattered around, and maybe the walls have 5% fragments. I look on around the north. Mount Hadley itself is in the shadow, although I can see that the ridge line on the top of Mount Hadley up through is smooth. I see no jagged peaks of any sort. The hill I would call number 22 on your map. Far distance also looks smooth around it. No prominent features. I'll skip the distance field around at my 6 o'clock because it's all in the shadow, and looking into the sun, of course, it obliterates almost everything. As I look on down to my 7 o'clock, I guess I see Index Crater here, the near field, but back up on Hadley to the east of the Hadley Delta, again I can see smooth surface. However, I can see lineaments parallel. The rim of the crater is very subdued and smooth. Coming around, I'll just take a quick look at the near field for you here. It's all generally the same. The crater density is, I'd say, quite high, or somewhat higher than I expected. Sizes are mostly less than about 15 meters. The only large crater that I see is what I believe to be Index back here, about the 8 o'clock. And it has a very subtle rim, almost no shadow in the bottom of it. I think that's one of the things that was deceiving on the descent. There are very few deep, dark craters in the area. The distribution of fragments appears to be less than percent on the surface. They vary from a centimeter in size up to maybe 3 or 4 inches. Most of them appear to be angular. I see some fragments. I can give you some more of that out of the window. Applicability looks pretty good. Atomically, I think we'll have to keep track of our position, but I think we can manipulate the rover fairly well in a straight line, and I can see the base of the front as near as I can tell. Matter of fact, I think I see where the front runs into the level ground, where we get that 5-degree inflection. I see no boulders over there whatsoever. Looks like we'll be able to get around pretty good.
Roger, Dave. We copy.
And as far as outfit deployment, unfortunately, looking straight ahead is zero phase. It's blocked out somewhat, but if there's continuity of the surface that I see in our general position, I don't think we'll have any trouble taking the outfit about 300 or so and placing it. I just noticed a couple of items on the far side of the rim, on the flat horizon, Sallyport West there. Look like a couple of very large boulders on the horizon. Just unique, 2 of them. They're quite bright and quite sharp. I cannot see Hadley Sea at all. Coming down.
There's the signal. The beginning and the end of the first EVA.
Any sign of the south secondary cluster?
Well, I think he's going to ignore him here. He's coming back in.
It's a rise just to our south. And I don't see anything that's really prominent as far as elevation. I think the elevations on the models we've been working with were somewhat exaggerated because I just don't see that much detail looking up towards Hadley Delta.
Roger, Dave. We agree. Sounds like it may well be hidden behind a shallow ridge there.
It's really great.
Of course, he's still there, Jay. Yeah, it's 16G, of course, 1/6 of the gravity on Earth. But now he's getting back inside, and he has been out 25 minutes, lacking about 20 seconds. So they did not shorten the stand-up EVA. Counting the 5 minutes from the time he cracked the hatch and he started going out the tunnel, it would be now 30 minutes.
He's
coming back in. Apparently a very successful beginning. More talking than we've had from
can't see as well as you can, man.
Astronaut Scott, and we've had for the rest of the trip that preceded this. Okay, the hatch is locked, and his feet are coming down at this time. And so we've had our first stand-up EVA, our first look at the moon, with Mission Commander David Scott standing up head and shoulders outside, looking out from the top part of the lunar module, and describing what he sees. The hatch now is closed. They're both back inside, and now they'll be running through a number of repressurizing procedures.